When life gets unpredictable, preparation matters. In medicine, it's all about staying alert, ready for whatever comes through the door. On the road, it's no different. That's why Volvo designs vehicles to help anticipate risk, reduce harm, and protect lives. The Volvo XC90's advanced safety systems inspire confident decisions wherever the road takes you. The Volvo XC90, for life. Proud sponsor of the Pit Podcast. Learn more at volvocars.ca/safety.
Good morning and welcome back. 11:38 a.m. Do we have any runners with us today? You might want to know that the running app that you've been using may have some security issues. An investigation by Le Monde reveals that men charged with protecting Emmanuel Macron, French president, several U.S. presidents, and Vladimir Putin can be identified through their use of the Strava sports tracking app, obviously endangering their mission and the lives of the men that they protect. Revelations of security flaws of this kind have marked the existence of Strava, which is the leading app of its kind with over 125 million users. Here to speak with us about this is Mitch Joel. He's tech advisor, investor, author of Control-Alt-Delete, and founder of ThinkersOne. Welcome to the show, Mitch.
Good to meet you.
So Strava, the people that use it love it. I know that Dawn Kagan-Fleming, our newsreader here, was just saying that she loves Strava, loves to use it. And I've heard from many other people who love Strava as well. How does Strava work for those of us who aren't familiar with it?
Yeah, so much like Fitbit, Whoop, or even your Apple Watch, it's essentially an activity or exercise monitoring application. So it can do things like help you establish routes. It can help you track what you've done in terms of speed, in terms of distance, and things like that. And the big feature of it was its ability to have some social sharing within it. The idea that you could build a community around running. So even if you're not running with somebody physically at the moment, you could be comparing yourself to others and having that type of friendly competition to keep us active and going. And a great part of the application that people seem to love. But as we identified, or as Le Monde identified, that this comes with some potentially massive breaches. And what's really interesting about this story from my perspective is that it was initially an Australian student who was looking at the Syrian desert and found these quote unquote glowing trails. Glowing trails is basically areas of activity. And after just zooming in and taking a look at it, they realized that, oh, this is the presence of some type of military bases. And, you know, that you could see things like the layout of the base. You could see things like the paths that are being taken by military personnel in or around them because they're either exercising or just doing their job. And suddenly it goes beyond just bodyguards that are watching our politicians and celebrities and more into a massive potential security breach of millions of people, as you said, who are using the app in an innocuous way, not realizing that they're potentially leaking information out to people who could use it to harm them.
Mm-hmm. I remember during the pandemic how popular Strava was because of that social aspect, and you know, my daughter, a lot of her friends were on it, and she was able to track exactly where they were running. She knew exactly where they were. But you'd think that that would be the kind of thing that if you're in the military, you would receive a memo on and be warned not to have that application running, or not to, at least to disable the social function. I mean, don't you think is that the military's fault that they're not telling people to disable that?
No, we should be really clear that security agencies in both the U.S. and France have really downplayed this risk and this article. The U.S. Secret Service was really noting that personal devices are never permitted during active duty. And so while we have people who might be using them or may not realize that they have signed a certain agreement for privacy and to be careful, that might be where it's from. But in general, the bigger agencies are downplaying this.
Is Strava taking some steps to address these vulnerabilities?
I think that they would have to, but I think more importantly, what we need to see is that there's a bit of a regulatory gap here around consumer data. You know, tech companies have, let's face it, very few restrictions, especially on the collection and the sharing of this location data, in particular when the actual users are buying it for that purpose and giving them the permission to do so. And so, look, you definitely have experts in the field, and I'm by far an expert in cybersecurity, but there is this stress or need for governments to actually intervene and protect sensitive information. And they're talking about things like restricting how apps retain and use location data. But this becomes very convoluted when you have users that are actively purchasing that application or that tool for that specific reason. So it's a bit of a paradox here that we're stuck in.
Absolutely, because you have the different players. You have the tech companies that are producing the technology that's able to track and share the data, but then you also have people that are voluntarily agreeing to do it. So at what point does the government have to step in then? I mean, it is complicated, as you say. Do you think that the government should be forcing tech companies to make the danger more explicit, or the kind of the issues of sharing your data more explicit?
Look, it's a tough position to be in. I think ultimately, I might argue that prohibiting personal technology or use of it for personal use while you're on duty is even maybe potentially a bit unrealistic. I do think that the government agencies that are nervous about this maybe need to require more secure, maybe even get potentially anonymous versions of these apps so that they can encourage some type of alternate tracking or however it might be. I don't know if where the government is at, based off of all the regulation they still need to do in places like social media and artificial intelligence, if they're really going to take a massive step here. It feels to me like this is something that needs to happen between companies like Strava and their actual individual users. I think it would be unrealistic for Strava to put in some type of hooks that mention to people to ensure that they have proper privacy settings done in terms of their jobs and what their jobs require from a privacy standpoint. That seems a little bit onerous. I think in this instance, it does fall on the individuals and the organizations that are hiring these individuals.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've been talking about Strava, but are there any other apps that we should be wary of that may be tracking us without us knowing, or whose data we may be sharing?
I mean, I think we know that all apps are doing something like this. Many fitness apps, and Strava is one of them, depend on this user data to drive profit and drive engagement. So, and listen, often it's not even just that. They're often selling or sharing this data with third parties because they're trying to create additional value or marketing opportunities. But at the same time, they might be creating additional vulnerabilities. And I think there's just this broader trend in digital culture, which is this erosion of the boundaries between public and private data. And I think that as we're using these apps more and more in these digital tools, I don't know that consumers are really realizing how they're relinquishing control over their location and their personal information. And again, if these apps are constantly using location tracking, it does change how we think about our own personal security and our privacy. So it's a very uncomfortable place because, again, it requires us as users to be more educated. Mm-hmm. And it does require us in a world where we're sharing everything in every location with everybody to think about how that information flows and into which hands it might be, and also your vocation. Doesn't matter if you do it, it might depend in your life. And for most people, it's probably okay to share that, not really realizing that that could also be indicative of when might be a good time to come and rob your house, as an example.
Wow. Yeah. So many things to think about there. Mitch Joel, tech advisor, thank you so much for sharing your insights on this with us today.
Thanks, Justine. Have a great day.
You too.